We are going to move on now to our panel on deep tech. And today sees the publication of a new study on women in deep tech startups, which is conducted by EIT in cooperation with the EIF and EIB Advisory and funded by the European Commission. And it provides data-backed insights into the current representation of women founders in European deep tech and illustrates the current gender gap in investments in this sector. So to tell us more, I'd like to welcome one of the authors of the report, Amparo son José from EIT Food. Please do come, and she's going to moderate the, no, I'm going to moderate the panel, but she's going to tell us more about the study. Also Kinga Stanislawska, European Women in VC, and Yvonne Greeuw from Invest NL. Please do come up to the stage. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm going to start with Amparo. So yes, if you are going to talk us through the study, you're just going to do a short presentation. And
so I'll start. So here you see another new flag. You have a new flag there. So this is the EIT. So this stands for the European Institute of Technology and Innovation. And we do have a program that is called Supernovas, and there we are aligned with your objectives. So Supernovas is a program to bring more women to the entrepreneurship and investment ecosystem. So one of our flagship programs targets some of the issues that you mentioned today. So we train women from a STEM background. 40% of our students, they have a PhD, they are all women. And we look for venture capital funds like you that are looking to attract female and STEM talent. And every year we deliver, we scout for 30 venture capital funds. And as of now, we got an average of 50% of the interns becoming full-time employees of a venture capital fund. Ah, this is the clicker. Okay. Sorry, it was my fault. Okay. So now this is what I was telling you. And the EIT is an EU agency that does a lot of things for women entrepreneurs and investors. So I encourage you to have a look to the website. And if you need female talent, please come back to us. Also, for those of you that are looking for female entrepreneurs, we have a platform that is called the Supernovas Data Room. And there we have kind of a bit more than 500 startups founded and led by women and supported by the EIT. That you can have a look if you're looking to increase your pipeline. So why did we did this year? This is our third study. Last year we do women-led scale-ups, and this year we did women in deep tech, because we said, okay, let's gonna do a nice study, because everybody's looking for deep tech startups. So I'm sure that women in deep tech, they were getting better results at the average than on the average study of women. So I don't have better news on that. I have bad news again, but we have to live with that. Something that is important, and you just mentioned, is that we look at women-funded startups. So we avoided women-led startups, or women that had a C role, or women that defining startups, women-founded startups as a startup with a woman in a C-level, or a woman in the board. At the board, so these are startups that are co-funded by women. Unfortunately, we don't know the percentage, as someone said at the table. We don't know the percentage of women in the cap table, but this is the best that we could do. So here you have the big number, is that we have 1,200 startups funded by women in Europe. That is 17.4% of the total. That's for you to say that's a lot. Or a lot or a little, but that's the reality. 17.4% of deep tech in Europe are funded by a woman, or they have a woman founder in the team. So we avoided to have one of these studies that they look at what happened the previous year. So we look, all the figures that you will see, almost all of them refer to the last decade. So we have been looking at what has been happening in the past 10 years. It's getting better, because if you see last year, the number of startups founded, the percentage of startups funded by women in deep tech were close to 24%. And if you look at 10 years ago, they were half of them. So only 11.3% of startups in 2010 were funded by women. So that's double. It's a bit less sign in the picture when you look at the number of women that are in startups in deep tech. So because startups can have more than one founder, so there's still a lot more male founding deep tech startups than women, but still, again, double. So 10 years ago, there were only 7% of founders were female, and now we are about 14%. So that's the good news. It's still low, but good news. Something that says a little about some women traits is that women don't like to start things by themselves. So the solo startup is the most typical way, or the most typical structure of a deep tech startups. Almost 50%, 46% of all deep tech startups have a solo founder, and only 10% of the solo startups are founded by a woman. That says something. 90% of solo startups are male, and women are not taking this solo exercise. So we need to be surrounded by teams. And sometimes, often, women, there is only one woman or maybe two women in a startup. But if you want to see kind of a number of women, that like 3 women in a startup, there is only 1% of women that have 3 founders. So last time I did this, well, the first time that I did this presentation, because it's the second one, I said that we will give a prize from the EIT if you find us one startup with 3 women founders, and the prize will be bigger if there are 4 founders, 3 women, and 1 male. So that's a challenge. If you have in your portfolio, please bring them to us, and we will do a nice case study on them. Another important thing is that, yes, we don't like solo founding, but we like very large teams. So that creates a bit of more complexity. So where you see women, you see more founders. So larger teams, women are in teams with that are larger, so with more founders. And they are younger, not in terms of the age of the person, but they are younger because if you saw the first slides, it's in the first year when we've been having more women founding startups. So these startups are younger than the average age of a startup. So if you put everything together, that means that maybe we see women deep tech startups have more management complexities than other type of startups. And then I think that someone mentioned something in the morning. I think it was over the third row there, someone from the Netherlands. I don't know if you are somewhere else now. But it's true that when you look at the regions, there are things that happen that are kind of curious. So I'm from Spain. And I always think that the southern countries, are very male-dominated, this matches approach, whatever. So we always double ourselves, thinking that we are worse than the others. But actually, when you look at this, and it also happens in the study we did last year for scale-ups, yes, the south is not performing that bad. Actually, what you see is that Central Europe, that is the powerhouse of women in deep tech startups, or deep tech startups in male or female terms, or whatever combinations. So the big number of startups is founded in Germany, France, and also in the UK, but it's not in these figures. But these countries are not performing that well in terms of a gender balance, because what you see is that in Central Europe, you have 15% of all deep tech startups being funded by women. But when you see, they are not a majority. Only 90% of the 15% of the startups have the founding team with a majority of women. But you go to the south, or even to the east of Europe, you see that the number of the proportion of women deep tech startups funded is, for instance, in South Europe is 21%. And if you look at those teams, you have the majority of founders that are women. That's super, I'm super proud of that. But again, it's not clear-cut, because if you look at a given year, and that's 2022, you will see the countries in yellow is where you have more startups. And then if you go to the countries in orange, which I will say they are more representative, just because the number of startups, the sample there is bigger, the number of women deep tech startups founded is bigger, so it's more relevant statistically. So you see here Spain, Poland, and Finland, and Lithuania. So these countries is where you can see more diversity among founders of women-led startups. So this is when you go to the granularity, you find some differences that we just found them. It's for all of us, or for all of you to explain. If you go to the study, you will get all this data more granular per year and per other regions. Again, here it's not news. we thought that, okay, everybody, all the venture capital funds are looking for a deep tech startup. So it shouldn't matter if they are founded by a woman or not. I wouldn't expect to find this kind of imbalance or discrimination, but yes, still is there. So women founded deep tech startups, they are getting, in fact, the way to say it is, to read it is, they are getting 50% less of the funds that proportionally they should receive. Because remember that we have 17% of startups founded by a woman, but they are only receiving 11.5%. So that actually is 50% less of the money that we should be receiving for those startups. And again, the first round is smaller. But I will explain later something positive on this. And also what you see here is that the more women that are in a team, the less funds that they get. So here again, this just to see for, again, the distribution of funds. Obviously, the majority is the big money goes to Central Europe, and the rest of the regions are getting, in some cases, very little money that goes to them. Here is something that I would like to acknowledge in this audience, because what we saw, there is a clear conclusion, there is the women deep tech startups are here in many cases because of the public funding, because of the funds from the EIC, from the EIT, from national innovation funds, etc. The public sector funds more women deep tech startups and earlier. So women deep tech startups, they get lower funds in the first round, but in many cases, or in more cases, or proportionally more for public sources, which invest earlier, because typically the public money is associated to research and development, so the first round comes earlier. That's the only good news, because for the rest, the round is smaller, and as we will see later, the valuation of this first round is lower. Apart from that, we didn't find any explanation for the private sector to be so many of you, sorry, we didn't find any explanation for the private sector, the private venture capital sector, not having a bigger role in funding women deep tech startups. As I mentioned, valuation still is a bit better than comparatively, is better than the funding, because the valuations are lower, but more or less the valuations that are attached to women deep tech startups is more or less related, or more or less aligned with the proportion of the number of startups. It's only a little bit lower if you compare the decade. When you make the segmentation between seed and Series A and B and beyond, really what the biggest difference in terms of penalizing women deep tech startups is at the very early stage. So the earlier rounds, they are smaller, and even smaller from the private sector. So, yeah. So here I will not stop. You can read them, and I've been told that they are they will be in the website today. You can read all in detail. But some takeaways is that the teams are different. So women in deep tech teams are different. Still, we need more women. There is no explanation if the venture capital industry is really looking for deep tech, for high technology. There is not an explanation that justifies for not being more active in this space, and women deep tech startups not receiving more funding. Again, in the report, you can go a bit more into the regions and different granularity, more detailed granularity. But as I say, I think a closing word is that we need to thank the effort of the public sector for covering in a space where the private sector should be more present than it is. And here we're missing a lot of talent from women in deep tech, women with a strong scientific and technology background, that they are not getting their work rewarded when they become entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amparo. So I'd just like to follow up with our speakers on their reactions to the findings. And Kinga, the study reveals, as we know, that women in deep tech startups receive significantly less funding. How do you think we can build a compelling business case to demonstrate that investing in diverse teams can actually lead to higher returns?
Well, I think that, it's the women already build a compelling business case. So it's not that. I think that what we need is for these startups, the deep tech startups, to build more partnerships, to build revenues, to show to investors that they are interesting. And then investors will follow, because what is better than investor money? It's always going to be revenue. So therefore, if we can get products to market, if we can get POCs going, if we can help women in those relationships that they often lack with corporates, with partners, via ecosystem building, which is many of the things that Amparo has been leading, trying to put all these different partners together, I think that is successful. And that would be super, super helpful to these women in deep tech.
But don't we want to also be able to demonstrate that investing in diverse teams will actually lead to better results? Isn't that part of the argument? I mean, would you agree? How would one show that?
Yes, well, we have done studies on how mixed teams on the investment level deliver better results. We did a study last year where we analyzed 118 VC funds, and for every 10 percentage points of more women in the decision-making level, there was a 1.3 percentage point more IRR. We also know that companies on the stock exchange, and there has been a lot of analysis of that, in management teams where you have a diverse management team, they tend to have better financial results, leading to a higher share price. So that we know. With startups, this is not so always easy. I think startups take a very long time to mature, and the data, we need more data. We always need more data to be able to say certain things. We know that there are super successful mixed teams out there in the market. I think we need to show them more as role models to really be able to bring, again, more mixed teams to business and finally come up with numbers.
Thank you very much. Yvonne, so I'm going to sort of ask you two questions. One is, how does Invest NL consider diversity in founding teams when also taking investment decisions? And also, what in your view are the key returns of these investments? Are they financial, or is it social, etc.?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think InvestNL is a public investor, so the MPI of the Netherlands. Apparently, we're already doing quite well from your research, but it can be better, especially also from my opinion. I've been there for 1.5 years now. The way that we're working on it is firstly collecting data, so see what comes in from inbound deal flow, and how do we treat those new propositions that we handle. What I see is that many people, it depends on the investment manager or on the person handling the deal. So I have 3 female investors in my team and 7 male. And I see that there's more effort being put into the female propositions that come in, even though there are little. We have to put more effort also in outbound deal flow sourcing and trying to find actively those female founders, because there are not so many coming in. Next, we have a super good ESG department at InvestNL. And what I also liked from the discussion this morning is that the EIF also considers it a lack of diversity as a key risk, which is also true, actually. So then you would also have to keep it into account in your return calculations. And actually, that would also substantiate the argument that diverse teams would also lead to higher returns. So that's also a viewpoint that I find super interesting. We don't have it yet in our strict requirements or so, but I think we're getting there with targets, with efforts, with things like Code V, which is an initiative that we signed as InvestNL to support more diversity in the VC landscape and also in the female founder landscape. So we're getting there, but in practice, it's hard, and it depends largely on the individual, and that's why I like it that InvestNL also pays attention to hiring more females in the VC space as well. The seniors is still a hard one. I hope to get more advice here. They usually get the experience argument, and that's hard to find. That's, at least in the Netherlands, that's still true. So I hope to get more tips here on how to convince my usually male older colleagues that actually people from diverse backgrounds can also have great contributions to our investment teams, and that they can be the new senior investment manager.
Thank you. Amparo, you were wanting to come in. Do you want to just comment on that before I ask you a question?
Yes, I wanted to comment on the... we are looking at deep tech startups. So we know that this type of startups, they take longer to reach the market stage and generate revenues. So the problem is that, as we saw, the first round for them is smaller. So if you want to make these women-founded startups to get to market, they will do it later than the average startups because they are starting with less funds, period. So that's a problem for them. So I don't know if we can wait that long to see that, to have enough role models of women deep tech startups led by women to start investing in them, at least from the private sector. So I think there is an urgency to say, okay, if we decouple women deep tech startups or women-led startups, they don't have to be more profitable. Their return on investment, we don't need to ask them to be higher. Just being equal, it would be okay. So maybe we should assume that startups are all good enough. I mean, we don't have a difference in the teams, but this type of startups, they need to start in the right foot to be able to run at the same speed. So, and we need that in Europe. We need more deep tech startups. If they are funded by women, that would be even better.
Yeah, just to add to that, actually, usually founders fund startups around issues that they see as important. So, of course, the female-led startups will often be focused on, for example, female health. And that we need much more of. So it's really about solving certain problems that we see in the world, and that women as consumers, as mothers, as caregivers, in their different roles, tend to see much more of. And what we want to see as a well-functioning society is actually money going to solve those issues. And as Amparo said, they take a long time, and we can't wait. But the reason isn't because they're women. The reason is because we want these issues solved. And I think this is what we really need to think about.
You've both set up my next question, which was to Amparo as well, about the study. And I was going to ask you about what is the typical profile of a woman in deep tech founder? And what are the main hurdles she's facing?
There is one thing that I didn't mention that is very important. Women in deep tech startups, they have clearly superior education. So they have been studying for more years. The number of PhD holders the proportion is higher between women than in men. So we have a very strong technological and scientific background. So probably you can couple that with the fact that they have less business experience. And then you join that they have larger teams. So that's something that probably many VCs don't like because it's a lot of complexity. Researchers, women, and on top of that, many co-founders. So wow, excellent. So I think that we need to pay attention to these differences and make our best to support them, help them to bridge whatever managerial skills they have, pay a little bit of attention whether the team is complementary and they have all the skills that they need in the team to really run fast and make an effort in give them reasonable funding. Maybe even if the private sector cannot overnight fulfill their role properly, maybe we can say, okay, the public sector is doing that very well, but still is faster, but it's smaller the round. So maybe this kind of sometimes is charity investment or charity grants because they are smaller. So maybe you have at national level or a European program, you give them 100K. This is great, it's 100K, it's very fast, but they don't need 100K, they need 1 million. So maybe the public schemes that are looking at women, they can say, okay, how much is the real amount of money that women are receiving, at least until the private sector does not brings this to an equal level.
So what is the private sector doing at the moment? I mean, what would you like to see them doing to support these?
I see them invest, I would like to see them investing more in women in deep tech, earlier and with bigger funds, with bigger amounts. That will really give all many of the instruments or the tools that women in deep tech, they need to grow faster.
Okay, let's bring some questions in. There's a hand there. Thank you. Microphone coming.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you please, for me, define deep tech on your view? Because I think it could be very different from...
Yes. Well, we did it easy because otherwise we will never have ended. So I didn't put it in the study, but if you go through the study, you have the full methodology. So we use a definition by the room. So we cleared out, we took the definition, they have different technologies, but we didn't have, we didn't went through the effort of checking every single startup according to our standards, but we use the methodology of the room. So you can check what is there.
Yeah, we use a bit more strict definition, I think, at InvestNL Deep Tech Fund, because we have to use it as a ground to actually accept or refuse founders a lot. And we say that deep tech companies they require large capex investments. It's usually tech risk combined with market risk, so the market is not there yet sometimes. There needs to be a clear scientific base to a startup. There needs to be a defensible IP position, so not just patents, it can be know-how as well or other things. Usually you require large investments before market entry. And yeah, I think those are the most important criteria for us. In the Netherlands, we also have definitions of key enabling technologies. So you say, for example, quantum technology or advanced materials or semiconductors or photonics, are the technologies that we're looking at.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe to add on that, and that's exactly, I think, where the definition goes. Are you looking at starting deep tech research and getting more women into that and getting them to start thinking about a company? Or I invest in the same definition as InvestNL. You want there to be a product, there should be IP, it should be defensible. In order to get the IP done, to get it to a market, to get product market fit, normally takes 4 years if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing because you're a first-time entrepreneur, it might take you 10 years and you might never ever succeed. So the gap that we need to bridge is actually how to get more women in STEM to actually become successful entrepreneurs. And we might need the people that are already successful in that, which at the moment are men, to be the buddies and the investors in those women. And that's the missing link that we have. And as investors, we cannot solve it. I can teach another woman to become a good investor because I am, so I can teach her. I can't teach a female founder in STEM to become a good entrepreneur in deep tech because I'm not. Right? So we need the people that know to teach the people that have the ambition to become one.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. And I think that there are some, at least we have some schemes in what we do at EIT and what we do in Supernovas. There is a cross-kick, is a transversal activity according to sector. So when we are supporting a woman entrepreneur, we try to give them the support they need beyond funding. So if you look at, for instance, in Supernovas, we have a program that is called Rocket Up. And we are looking at the startups that are already ready to internationalize. And as we know, that women, they have this less access to networks and less capability to network that you also discussed in the morning. So we say, okay, where do you want to go? So we find you a mentor there. We find you a coach in the destination market, and he can open the doors. It's normally a man. He can open the doors. He can help you to find the distributors. He can help you to understand the regulation in that sector, etc. So we try to do it, and we are not the only one. We are also collaborating with the EIC, with the European Innovation Council, in the Women Leadership Program, and that's again a program for women entrepreneurs, and there is a strong mentoring program and coaching. So yes, it's true that but you have to force it. It doesn't happen naturally. So that's why it's difficult to scale, because ideally, if I think that Kinga, I don't come from the VC world, but if I were to look for someone that explain me how the VC world works perfectly, I can find Kinga, but not everybody can find the right mentor. Not every woman can find the right mentor, so that's why you have programs that's difficult to scale, unfortunately.
There's also another argument that if you provide your founder with enough capital to be able to iterate on the mistakes, they will get there by learning on their own, which is a privilege that male founders by and large get, female founders by and large don't get. Sorry to generalize, but in fact it's true. That's why the rounds going to male colleagues are just larger. Therefore, instead of getting this, we were just looking at, with Amparo earlier at a diagram that said that women want the capital. They want to learn from their own mistakes. They don't want more coaching, mentoring, and all these little things and bells and whistles. They want to be at the same table with the same cards and the same, value for their company as the male colleagues are. And also, I'm sure that when female-led companies raise a lot of money, they can hire and pay those male colleagues that have learned how to do this already, just simply by paying them to be advisors, as men do.
And sorry, and also very important is that we saw that we need to get women in deep tech startups in any form, because we all know that serial founders are the more successful, and the proportion of someone creating a startup is higher, a lot higher if they have been in a startup. So if you look at the figures, we have seen that 86% of founders in deep tech startups are male, for 14% of only women. See, it doesn't really matter in which position, but the proportion of men is higher than the proportion of startups. Let's compare it in that way. So we will continue to see more male co-founded startups in deep tech, because they are the vast majority. So we need to get women in whatever position into deep tech startups, because the tendency, the trend or the proportion of them that they will be creating startups in the future will be higher. The industry is lacking of female talent. That's the only, if they are there, is the only option that we have for them to create startups in the future.
Thank you. Do we have time? Do we have any more questions? Yes. Can we just bring the microphone, please? Thank you.
In Europe, we have enough deep tech venture capital, or venture capital are more focused on B2B models in Series A, Series B, software and less hardware and less tech risk?
Well, in Europe, we don't have enough venture capital, full stop. We are probably a third of what we should have. There is a 370 billion gap in growth capital only. So we have a problem at every level, and we have a badly functioning financial system. We know that. We know that pension funds are not even investing any. It's like after 3 zeros or 4 zeros after the comma. In venture, we know that family offices prefer to get returns from real estate than back deep tech startups, or actually any startups. We know that our companies are leaving to go to the US because that's where they get the growth rounds. And we know we're doing this insufficiently. We all read the Draghi report. What can we do? I guess that's really the topic for everyone in the room to get involved, to push harder, and to ensure we get more capital into the whole ecosystem to solve for all these things.
Yeah, and deep tech, of course, particular, it's harder, of course, to raise money there. It's getting better, though. In the Netherlands, now Innovation Industries has raised quite a big deep tech fund, also with help of pension funds. So maybe that's a nice example for others to follow. But we see indeed that the software startups are perceived less risky, which is also true. You need less maybe patience as an investor. So that also depends on your LPs. How quickly do they want to see returns? I think it's getting better, but slowly, and especially for the Series B and onwards, it's hard in Europe. And yeah, regarding the software and B2B SaaS startups, it makes a bit sense in Europe where the landscape is so scattered that it's easier to scale up those software companies, right? In companies where everyone speaks English and doesn't have different regulations, maybe you can just build your company in Ireland and have nice tax benefits there and then just scale it up in whole Europe. That's just an easier model, so also to fund, yeah.
Yeah, hello. I have a question for InvestNL. So if you're focusing on that particular part of the market, deep tech, I suppose you're not leading the round sole investors. So how do you find your co-investors in this very difficult market?
Yeah, good question. So we're not doing only deep tech. We have a 250 million deep tech fund, which I'm part of, and then there's 2.5 billion other assets under management. But how we find our private co-investors is also doing indirect investments, so fund investments where we see where the gaps are, and we try to fund those, funds that actually fill those gaps. So, and they can go invest with us. So that's one way that we're trying to solve it. Another way is doing market research and seeing, okay, which parties need to be brought together, where are the gaps, how can we make a market more attractive, maybe take away some of the hurdles in the VC process or the perceived risk. So that's another way.
So, Amparo, would you classify AI as deep tech? I mean, I'm sorry to open this right now, but I mean, there's going to be much more of AI, presumably, in your deep tech.
If you ask, I don't know to what extent a database is able to make the difference, but if you ask me, there is a part of AI that is not deep tech any longer. Using AI, generating an algorithm, maybe is not, but this is something that we have to consider, that when you do a study, you cannot clean one startup by a startup. We did in terms of founders, in terms of the gender of founders, because already we knew already that the database was not clean enough. So that's important. But if you ask me, no, there is a part of AI that is not deep tech any longer.
Ah, okay. Well, we're not talking about this now. Possibly just one more question, and then we'll close for the coffee break. If there aren't any, I will close now. Thank you.
Can we celebrate for a moment? Because this is a huge job that you guys produce. So thank you for doing this and helping us carry your message. Do more, please.
Yes, we will be doing more. We just closed the contract. Next year, in 6 months' time, we will be producing a report on gender bias study. And I'm sure that the research institutes that we hire, I hope that they can reach to you as venture capital funds, because you are part of the methodology. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you very much, Amparo, and to the speakers. And you saw the report, the study here for the first time launched today, fresh, hot off the press. So you're the first to know.